Buonasera a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be here this afternoon in Assisi to celebrate the publication of the Italian version of the book of His Majesty, Harmony. I'd like to thank Brother Marco Moroni, Mr. Mercati, and all the other organizers of this meeting for their kind invitation to take the floor today in this wonderful place. The sacred monastery, Sacro Convento of St. Francis in Assisi. It's a place of extraordinary beauty and of deep spirituality, which is the custodian of the memory and of the inheritance left by St. Francis. On this important occasion, I have the honor of reading a message of His Majesty, King Charles III, received from Buckingham Palace. I'm going to read it in English, but it is available also in Italian.
In this 800th anniversary year of his death, I am delighted to join you, albeit sadly only in spirit, in your celebrations of St. Francis, the Poverello of Assisi, that richest of poor men, who abounded with such insight and spiritual wisdom. Over the subsequent centuries, St. Francis has become a symbol of inspiration and hope for Christians of different churches and even for non-believers, with his universal message of the essential harmony of creation. St. Francis is a gift for all people of goodwill. The saint's spirituality was imbued with wonder and joy, profoundly attentive to the abundant diversity of creation. In this age, marked by the unprecedented and increasing destruction of our natural world, the inspiration of St. Francis is more relevant and more necessary than ever before. In his extraordinary letter, Laudato Si', the late Pope Francis drew the world's attention to the devastating and wide-ranging environmental degradation which risks the very survival of our planet. He expounded the Franciscan vision that God's presence is to be found in the smallest details of creation. We know that the finely woven tapestry of life is undoubtedly one of the greatest marvels of our universe. But crucially, no one element can survive for long in isolation, as nature is herself rooted in wholeness. With solutions increasingly available and urgency ever more critical, now is the ideal time to be putting nature at the center of our economy. Our world is connected by common laws and principles which find expression in mathematical laws, in geometry, physics, and above all, in nature. Nature-based solutions, regenerative practices, and circular bioeconomy supply chains can improve economic systems to build rather than destroy. Natural capital. Just a few of these solutions and practices are presented in my book, Harmony, published originally in 2010. It is wonderful, therefore, to know that Aboca is publishing an Italian translation to be released in Assisi today. I am especially pleased that the proceeds from the Italian version of Harmony will go towards protecting some of the glorious Umbrian terrain, which must have shaped St. Francis's own love of nature and must have nourished his spirituality. I can only thank each one of you who has worked so hard to bring this event to pass and who labour daily to nurture harmony in our world. I pray that you will always draw inspiration from the words of St. Francis, that all the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. Charles. Ringrazio tutti voi e tutti coloro che si impegnano a rendere il messaggio universale di San Francesco sempre vivo nel nostro tempo. Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for these wonderful words. And of course, thank you also for the message from King Charles III. So we are here to introduce the topic we're going to discuss today. We're going to introduce the Italian version published by Aboca Edizioni of the book Harmony, A New Way of Looking at the World. So I would like to invite the editorial director of Aboca Edizioni, Antonio Riccardi, and of course the two co-authors, Tony Juniper and Ian Skelly. Please. Thank you, Marta. Thank you all. Apologies for my voice, which is far from perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to use my headsets because my English is just like Chinese. It's impossible to understand. However, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all. It's not just formally, and not just formally. I would like to thank you for those who have been organizing this festival for 10 years now. It is a festival that is meant to build a network, a community of people who love to work in order to protect and safeguard the places that connect people and groups of people. And also on behalf of the colleagues of Aboca, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our editors, Anna Zider and Massimo Mercati, our publishers, because this activity of this Aboca publishing company is really special. The work we do. I would also like to say something. I'm really proud in having published this book because I've had the opportunity to meet the co-authors of the book, together with King Charles, of course. This book has a strange history, so to speak. It's a book which was written more than 10 years ago. It was 2010, 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And the question is that it is a book that is still current. All that is written in this book is still current. But before focusing on the concept, I'd like to ask Tony and Ian to briefly tell us something about your relationship with His Majesty King Charles III, because this book was written when King Charles was not King Charles, he was the Prince of Wales. So I'd like to ask Ian, you go first. How did you get to know Charles III, and how did you actually work in writing this book?
Well, I work for the BBC. I'm a broadcaster. I go on the radio and I talk about classical music and I talk about art. And I had a very good friend who was a painter who the Prince of Wales collected. And I was introduced to the Prince of Wales, the King, at my friend's funeral when he died. And I was invited by the Prince to go and see my friend's paintings at the King's house. And we shared quite a lot of interests in what is in this book. And then one day, probably about a year later, I took the plunge and suggested that some of his speeches that he gave were rather dense. What I meant by that was that because I work in radio, I speak to my audience, whereas people tend to write a speech, which then sounds very difficult to understand. And I offered to help him write a particular speech, which he gave in New York. And I was then trapped for 20 years, helping him to write his speeches. That first speech, though, was very special to me, because when he came back from New York, he rang me to tell me that it was very successful. I'd made Meryl Streep cry. And so that was the start for me, 20 years of helping him to articulate the detail of what he has long understood and wanted the world to not so much learn, but to relearn, because all of what is in this book is old knowledge. It says a new way of looking at the world, but really what he wanted to say was we have forgotten so much.
Yeah, exactly that, Ian. So my first interactions with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, was in the early 1990s whilst I worked at Friends of the Earth, and I came into contact with him through various initiatives we were running on tropical rainforests, sustainable agriculture, later on climate change, and then towards the end of my time working at Friends of the Earth, he asked if I'd like to come and help with his new initiative called the Prince's Rainforests Project, which was an attempt to draw together all of the different organisations and entities trying to do something about tropical forests. And I said, of course, I'd be delighted to come and do that. And around the same time, he said, actually, I've got this book that I'm thinking of doing, and I've got a chap called Ian Skelly who's going to help. Would you like to help as well? And so I finished up being heavily occupied in these different projects. And then from the period of the Rainforest Project and Writing Harmony, I continued to work helping him with the kind of activities that he's also known for in terms of action on climate change and farming, and the work he did around some of the COP meetings and some of these global moments. And became more familiar with his thinking through working on this book, which, as Ian says, the subtitle is slightly misleading. And, it really is an attempt, I think, in Harmony for him to present his philosophical underpinning for all of these different things he's been doing. Because one of the points he makes in here is that, people see me doing rainforests in the morning, agriculture in the afternoon, I'm doing something about young people in the evening. Actually, all of these things are fundamentally connected. And as Ian said, the wisdom that we've lost, if we rediscovered it, we could solve a lot of these problems. And I can think of no better place than to be launching this Italian edition than here right now on the 800th anniversary of St. Francis's life, and the extent to which he saw these connections between poverty and nature and combining these big ideas rather than seeing them as separate, which is what Harmony is all about, taking a unified view of these big challenges.
Yes, and the word harmony is very important, because he wanted it to be called Harmony because harmony it's the Greek harmonia, which means to join things up. And what he really wants to try and stress in this book is that nature is a joined up system. It's not made up of different parts. Everything depends upon everything else. It's an integrated, interdependent system. But what we have done over the past 100, 200 years is we have seen nature as a machine which is made up of parts. And you can manipulate one particular part to do a good job there without thinking that there are consequences for the system over here. The classic example is the way we now farm. We put more and more pesticides onto the crops to kill the insects, which doesn't necessarily help the bird population that is all part of the system. And then the pesticides run off into the rivers and the streams and kill the fish. So you get good, tall crops, but you cause lots of different problems elsewhere. Nature doesn't operate like that. Nature is a cyclical, integrated system. And so what he wanted to do by calling it harmony was to stress that we have to put nature at the heart of our thinking, and we have to recognize that nature is this completely integrated system. I mean, incredibly integrated. It's beyond our imagination how integrated it is. The trees that you see are all communicating with each other via fungi underground and the bacteria in the soil. And remember that in a pinch of soil, there are more microbes than there are people on Earth. And so what we do to the soil, which we don't think of as being particularly significant when you just pick it up, it can be, well, it is, it's becoming catastrophic. So that's why he wanted to call it harmony.
I may have presented 100 books in my life, but this time it's easy because they are great. They can talk directly, so they don't need me here. So what came to mind, Ian, while you were talking? There is one thing. At a certain point, you talk about grammar, the grammar of harmony. In juxtaposition to a vision of the world that is reductionist, in other words. I study individual things. Maybe I study them very well, in depth. I understand them in a detailed way, in a deep way, but I run the risk of missing the complexity, the overall thing, where all the parts, all the components are included and interact. Something which occurs to me. My father, a doctor, disillusioned with life, a pessimist, and he said about medicine and doctors, today's physicians have lost this notion of a human being as an overall person. They're quite good at interpreting individual symptoms, but what they are missing is the overall view. Because actually everything is connected and everything is related to each other. That is the grammar of harmony you talk about. But something which impressed me is that King Charles in 2010, which is quite early, much earlier, than the very complex situation of our planet today. So he said, I've been dealing with these things for 30 years, for 40 years, and this is something which came to my mind while you were talking. Some people say, today, in the morning, you've been talking about farming. Then in the afternoon, you speak to young people. But he actually managed, through this book, you built an integrated vision, a comprehensive vision, talking about all the issues. For instance, something which impressed me is the issue of architecture. So inhabiting is, living. Where do we live? Who we are when we inhabit a place. So he says, identifying Le Corbusier as the beginning of the loss of relationship with nature and the natural harmony. So this is when we started losing something. What have we lost actually there?
Yes. So you're combining a lot of different thoughts, which is what the book does. So this is fantastic. But the architecture is a good starting point to be thinking about this idea of the grammar of harmony, because the king's thought is that if we inspired our thinking across different subjects through the ways in which nature works, we would get much better outcomes for people. So this is not about saying we must protect nature at the expense of people. It's about taking an inspiration from nature in order to be able to enable people to thrive. And so the idea of circular economy, for example, is something which is widely spoken about today, but that's what nature does. There is no waste. The decomposition of an animal, it turns into vegetation, it draws carbon from the atmosphere, the water is being endlessly recycled, the soils are doing a miraculous job in turning nutrients back into plant growth. All of these things are functioning in ways whereby there's mutual interdependence across the system. And so his idea is that we take nature as our inspiration, and architecture is one area where in the book he applies these patterns in nature to how we used to do architecture. And it was amazing to be in the Basilica today to see an example of that, of how the proportions, the arches, the patterning in the window designs, they're all based upon cycles and loops and spirals and angles that are inspired by how the natural world works. And his idea is if we inhabit buildings and built developments that mimic those patterns, it inspires us at a very deep level to make us feel differently. And I think anyone walking through this town and looking at some of the buildings here, compared walking through a city or a town that was built in the 1980s or 1970s with brutalistic square architecture and concrete, you feel very differently. And you're inspired to feel as though you're part of something bigger if you're in that beautiful sacred architecture, which has inspired all sorts of different designs, not only in the Christian world, but also in the Muslim faith as well. You find those similar patterns, which then he says are universal patterns, which appeal to people at a very deep level. And so that application of the patterns and cycles of nature into how we design the human world, our economy, our architecture, our agriculture, this is one of the messages that comes from harmony.
And you're very lucky in Italy because you still have so many cities which are built on traditional patterns. If you fly over Milan or you fly over here, you will see a certain patterning that you would see if you flew or just stood over a particular insect's nest. However, imagine flying over Los Angeles. You wouldn't see that pattern. What you would see is this straight line grid, everything designed for the motor car. A design which tends to prevent people from meeting. You've got wonderful piazzas here where society can happen. What has happened certainly in the United Kingdom over the past 60 years is that there have been increasing numbers of housing developments which have no town centre. They're just housing developments. You have to have a car to go to a shop. There's no doctor, there's no school. And of course, let's forget the tower blocks, which the now king calls, I don't know if you understand this in Italian, cul-de-sacs in the air. They go nowhere. And more to the point, they don't allow people to meet. And of course, crucially, you have no contact with the natural world. So what he wanted to demonstrate through this book and through the practical things he did in the United Kingdom and continues to do is to build towns that depend upon these patterns. You and I will walk so far and then we won't walk any further. And so you'll find in a traditional development that you have a series of tiny centres, piazzas, around which will be the baker and the butcher, the doctor, school, so on. And then eventually you walk so far and then won't walk any further, so another centre creates. And you get this honeycomb effect. We're all bees, really. We're building hives. So he was taking those patterns and creating several town centres in the United Kingdom and in Jamaica and now elsewhere in the world that better enable communities to come together. Because the important thing about this book for me is that ultimately the king, he's mostly interested in two things: the individual in community. We live in a world which is becoming ever more individualistic. Everyone is an individual. But what he's concerned about is the individual within community. And if you build and you put people in tower blocks, you don't necessarily get great communities. So how else can you build so that communities can be created and can cohere? And that's an important aspect. It's more important almost than the look of a building. It's how it's designed, how it makes us feel. And let's not forget, on the 800th anniversary of the death of one Francis and the first anniversary of another Francis, that there is a deep spiritual aspect, not just to them, but to us too. And what has also happened, which this book has tried to demonstrate in as many ways as possible, is that in the past 200 years, it's fair to say humanity has been reduced to the material, to the biological. The spirit and the soul have been sidelined and forgotten. But we are spiritual beings. We have an inner life, and we are affected by our environment. And we can feel bad and suffer mental illness, or we can feel good and get together. It depends how you build a place, and that's what he wanted to say here.
Un'altra questione mi ha molto colpito, la questione
There's another question, the question of time. You say that there are some steps, necessary steps that we must take, important steps day after day, each and every one of us. And we have to do that in order to reach a sustainable life. Now, basically, this means act every day in a sustainable way. Long-lasting actions, so to speak. That is, actions which, because they are sustainable, they last longer. They have to do with the time of a community. And I'm saying this now, in this very place, the Franciscan city, the seraphic city, which is focused on time. One of the most important questions is lasting for a longer time. The question of time is a question that is repeatedly mentioned in the book, and it is extremely interesting. Why? Well, because each and every one of us, when it comes to our sensitivity, so to speak, we feel that the questions of our time are urgent questions. Very urgent questions. Our world is raising urgent questions. It is as if we don't have much time to solve them.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the pressing nature of some of the ecological questions raised in here, nobody can now be unaware that we face into a potentially catastrophic level of global heating that's now upon us. We are at the beginning of a mass extinction of animals and plants, and some of the key resources that we depend upon to run our societies are becoming depleted. Soils and fresh water, fish stocks among them. So we do need to act urgently to be able to fix all of that, and we can fix it. And as the ambassador said with the King's words, you know, the solutions exist if we adopt them. Now, it seems to me that one of the challenges we face is that we lack an overall architecture, a big idea through which we can adopt those solutions. And at the moment, we are still struggling to align the needs of a rising population with diminishing environmental capacities, and we're trying to do it through economic growth. We're not looking at the underlying social tensions, the underlying cultural challenges, never mind the underlying philosophical disconnections between ever-rising consumerism and the shrinking capacities of our planet. And I think if we're going to break through that, we need a new big idea. And this is why it's so exciting to be back revisiting the thoughts in this book 15 years after the original publication, because I would say the world now is more open to a new big idea than when this was published. If you look around what's going on, the fact that we have these ever-rising tensions, these ever-rising crises, and no big answer to them. And so I think the idea of harmony now coming back into a profile where it's being looked at again, I think is a very exciting prospect. And I must thank and congratulate Aboca for coming with this Italian translation, bringing this book into another language and hopefully rekindling some of the ideas in here. Because if you look at what we're now facing into over the next 10 to 20 years, it is not a pretty picture. Do we just continue to have more economic growth, more consumerism, more plundering of nature? Or is it the moment when we revisit some of the fundamentals, look at the philosophical underpinnings of how we're seeking to develop and improve society into the future? Because if we are going to improve and sustain societies into the future, we are going to need to combine ecological capacities with social well-being and with a genuinely circular, sustainable, regenerative economy. That's what we must do. And so drawing this together in this book, hopefully we can find the foundations for that kind of conversation to break out in different places and to start building that alternative. Because I think we're flogging a few dead horses at the moment. That's an English colloquialism. I don't know if the translators can do anything with that. But the point is that we are in dire need of some new ways of thinking to be able to meet the challenges upon us.
Yes, because the part of the history that the king wanted to explain in this book was how our entire outlook changed because of the Industrial Revolution. The way we saw life and the way we saw nature operating became a mechanistic view of the world. We saw it as a machine. And we also saw progress as the great desire to make life ever more convenient, to make life ever more comfortable. These are good things. I'm not saying we shouldn't have developed lots of great medicines or anything like that. But the problem is that, as we all know, progress is designed, or the machine behind progress is designed to always make us not quite satisfied with what we've got. And we want more and more, and the progress is a line on a graph that goes like that. But if you look at what the consequences or the cost of this line as it goes higher and higher and higher to an absolutely perfect, comfortable life for us all, although I'm not sure that's achievable, the cost to the earth is getting ever greater. And so what this book is also asking is whether or not we have to change our view of that too. Is progress, as we've defined it over the past 200 years, the ambition? Should we do instead what the great American environmentalist Wendell Berry said, which is to revolve in order to dwell, which is the way in which nature operates. In English, the word sustainable is defined by if you look it up in the dictionary, the definition in English is to endure without failure. Nature has been enduring without failure for millions of years. But in the past 200 years, when we came along with our notions of progress, the wheel has started to fall off the machine, and it's a very worrying state that we're in. So yes, we have to change our entire paradigm. The king talks in the book quite a lot about ultimately, what we suffer from is not just an environmental crisis, but a crisis in our perception. The perception of what we are, what nature is, and what our relationship is with the rest of the natural world. And I had a long debate with him when we were writing this book about how he would define that. And at one point he came up with this phrase that we shouldn't see ourselves as being apart from nature, but we should see us as being part of nature. And then after a long series of conversations, he suddenly said to me, actually, that's wrong. Because if you say that you're a part of nature, that still implies that nature is made up of parts, when it isn't. So the answer in this book is to say, or to get ourselves to think, that we're not a part of nature, we are nature. And just as the environment outside us has been suffering because of what we do to ourselves, we are also actually doing terrible damage to our insides as well. Our biome is suffering from an environmental crisis because of the way in which the foods that we consume are now produced using lots of chemicals. So we're suffering the same environmental crisis inside as the rest of the world as well. And we have to see ourselves as being nature, and therefore what we do to everything else we also do to us. These are all, I think, fairly obvious things in 2026. But when I first, and Tony first got to know the Prince of Wales, he was considered mad for saying this. I can remember writing a speech with him good 20 years ago now, where he wanted to warn the world about plastics in the sea. Nobody had heard of this problem. And yet, what do we have today but an even bigger problem we had 20 years ago. So he was very ahead of his time with his thinking.
Sì, da questo punto di vista è molto importante.
Yes, from this point of view, it's really impressive, this book, because basically it poses us in front of some questions, observing these questions from a close distance, questions that are cogent, that are essential today in a very clear way. In an unavoidable way. I liked, you mentioned Walden Berry, an intellectual writer, poet also, and we published some essays by him, and he's an ecologist who was in advance, considering the time. What is strange is this. Many people who do not comply with this vision, who do not agree with this vision, they say, well, we cannot go back, can we? And as you said before, we are not ready to give up, I don't know, if we have a renal colic, we cannot give up our hospitals and the medicine, the pill or whatever it is, so that we can go beyond, we can overcome the renal colic. Or the strange chimera, you will remember that, happy reduction in growth, happy degrowth. Nobody thinks that degrowth as such is happy. It cannot be happy. No entrepreneur, no economist, no person who has to do with the economy can ever think that degrowth can be done like that. And we have to redefine the economic parameters of this revolution.
Exactly. The idea in here, in looking at this challenge we face with this ever-rising growth in gross domestic product, is not to abandon the idea of growth, but to think more deeply about what we're measuring as growing. So do we have growth in social cohesion, in well-being, in longevity, in mental health, in the state of the environment, as well as growth in economic wealth? If you put all of those things together, and if you tried to grow that metric rather than GDP on its own, behavior would radically alter, because you were seeking to grow something that's broader than simply the GDP, which at the moment we trade against the ecological outcomes. And you often see in debates in the media whereby growth is being held back, it is claimed, because we have some nature protection laws or some ambition to cut greenhouse gases, and the environmental rules are challenged in order to facilitate growth in GDP. But if you put these different metrics together, and economists have done this, there are measures including the Genuine Progress Indicator, which takes a whole basket of social and environmental and economic measures and puts them together, then you can begin to change behavior. But not to say that we're against growth. And of course, if you're an ecologist, growth is a fantastic thing. I think actually, the difference is, do we want growth like an old growth forest, or do we want growth like a cancer? Both of those things grow. One of them grows in ways which create benefits and interconnections, mutual interdependencies, which enables the system to become more complex at the same time as becoming more resilient. The other one kills its host. And I think our economic system at the moment is not like an old-growth forest, it's more like a tumor on the Earth's living fabric.
Metafora meravigliosa questa.
Wonderful metaphor,
E spiega molto
which
bene.
explains very well.
No, ma è molto...
No, it's right.
giusta perché
It's
si
a
comprende.
perfect
I think it is
metaphor.
true. Yeah, I think it's correct. Yeah.
Allora, abbiamo ancora qualche minuto.
We have a few more minutes because I think that during the round table later on we're going to talk about them. So, Ian, I'd like to ask you, after many years during which you have been working with the, so to speak, the public voice. In the meantime, after the book has been published, something has happened. The Prince of Wales is no longer Prince of Wales, but King Charles III. When I read this book, what came into my mind is that his intellectual rigor cannot be discussed. It's something that we can take for granted. His rigor, his idea of harmony, his idea of interconnection between the different parts of nature, his vision of nature that should suggest to each and every one of us how to behave is an integral part of his concept. Can you confirm this to us?
Yes, very much. I think just before the COVID pandemic, he was awarded a prize which he was very proud of down the road in Florence. He was made Renaissance Man of the Year. And this gave him the opportunity to give a speech in Florence, probably in English, I suspect, which I helped him write, where he was able to actually talk about the things that he's most passionate about, in particular the principles that underpin the Renaissance, in particular the philosophy of people like Ficino. So he's not putting something out into the world that is new and just him. What he's really trying to do is just remind us of what humanity has always known. And he certainly stands by everything that he has said in the past, and gets extremely passionate about it to this day. Goodness knows what will be said behind closed doors in the United States of America when he's there. And is it a week's time?
Yeah, it must be.
Yes,
in April. There's only a bit of April left. It must be next week.
So your counterpart in the United States, I suspect, is very nervous at the moment because he is a man who is tremendously passionate about the principles that are in this book, and also in the brilliant film that Nicholas has made, which is going to be shown later this evening, which is a wonderful demonstration of how the ideas in this book were picked up by so many people around the world and have been put to good use. And there are plenty of very fine examples, moving examples, of what is in this book and how it has changed lives around the world. If you are here to see the film, stay to the end. Because there's an extraordinary demonstration of one of the ideas that he had a very long time ago. It is breathtaking what has been done in a part of India because of these principles. So yes, he is a passionate man, and I mean the word sovereign, as far as I understand it, the king is the sovereign of the United Kingdom. That in ancient cultures, basically. The king, the sovereign, was the person that united heaven and earth. And so I think I say in the film somewhere, he is a man who he may have these big ideas, but his feet are firmly on the ground, and he also understands what the ground is that we're standing on and what it depends upon. Any thoughts?
How are we doing for time?
No, in effetti abbiamo...
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have run out of time because now we're going to have the round table and later on there will be the film. Really, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Tony, Juniper, and Ian Skelly from the bottom of my heart. They are the co-authors, and they're here to sign the books, copies of the books. If you are interested, if you want to purchase the book, to buy the book, frankly speaking, I have to say that the book is a mine of suggestions for a deep reflection on the contemporary world. It's really impressive, the many concepts that are there. So, for the time being, I'd like to stop here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Grazie davvero ancora ad Antonio Riccardi, direttore editoriale.
Thank you so much to Antonio Riccardi, editorial director of Aboca Edizioni, and the two co-authors, Tony, Juniper, and Ian Skelly, for this amazing dialogue. I'd like to ask the speakers for the next panel to sit next to me to start the second session.
Allora, eccoci qua di nuovo. Buonasera.
So here we are again. Good evening, and I'm quite pleased to introduce the distinguished guests around me. And I'd like to spend a few words to introduce the topic of our panel. We all know that today's theme is ecology, this new way of looking at the world. And this book entitled Harmony, dealing with the principles of harmony that occur in nature, which can be inspiring. We can draw inspiration from and find solutions. To start the panel discussion, I'd like to focus on a concept that emerges from the first pages of the book. Co-authors with King Charles encourage us to be optimistic. I love this word, optimism. Is often an attitude that is looked at as something vague or empty. Actually, concrete, tangible optimism means that things can change. Many of the things which happen in the world can depend on our attitude, on our posture, on the way in which we put our feet on the ground, the way in which we make decisions about our actions. And I'd like to start from here. This was already discussed in an incredible way by our co-authors and by Antonio. Lifestyles, the way of producing, the way of connecting to one another can certainly determine the main aspects of our lives. So by changing our mindsets, we can change actions. So looking at nature and seeking for solutions, concrete solutions in nature for this revolution, we can certainly take action and have long-standing, long-term changes. So we wanted to organize this panel with a broad reflection about how to concretely translate this vision of the principles of harmony in nature into concrete actions. So we are going to take this journey through our dialogue with the guests I'm going to introduce. We have Fra Marco Muroni, who was already introduced. He's the custodian of the Sacro Convento of San Francis of Assisi. He leads a community of friars, over 60 friars. If Fra Marco allows me, something about his biography. Before becoming a friar, he was a teacher of a primary school. I think that your biography also influenced somehow, or certainly brought you to take an attitude or a special care or focus on the aspect of education in your role. Next to me, on my left-hand side, Marc Palahi, CEO of Circular Economy Alliance. Mark is one of the most accomplished international experts in the field of climate change and forests, and he promotes a new vision in the role of transformation that forests can play in terms of climate change and the bioeconomy. So welcome, Marco Palei. On his left, Antonio Caschetto, the director of the Laudato Si Center in Assisi. Laudato Si is an international movement that was established on April 22. So for today, it's a we have an important celebration. First 2 years from the inception of the movement, which inspires the Catholic community on the themes of climate and ecology. On the right-hand side, we have Massimo Mercati, the CEO of Aboca and the president of the network of the municipal pharmacies in Florence. Massimo has always had a great interest in the systemic vision of life. And he's going to talk about this approach also in terms of his vision of an enterprise. He wrote a book, The Enterprise as a Living System. So with our guests, we'll try to translate this connection between the vision of St. Francis and what has emerged from the words of Charles III and the co-authors in the book entitled Harmony. So the importance of switching perspective, seeking in nature guiding principles to change things. So, from Marco Moroni, can you tell us how St. Francis' message can be, first of all, a current message, a topical message for our times that are affected by environmental crisis and humanitarian crisis, and how spirituality can be helpful to revive, to reconstruct, restore the bond between humans. Interdependence is a key in the principles of harmony, but also between humans and the creation. So, good evening to you all. I like that you underscored the fact that I was a primary school teacher. I did this just for 5 years. But this led me to speak in an easier manner in terms of my lexicon, I mean, the way I speak, but also the way I think. When you try to speak to kids, to children, I mean, I learned how to be understandable to everyone. That is the positive element. What could be negative is that sometimes I'm not able to speak in a difficult manner. And very often I meet people who are much more knowledgeable than me. For instance, my bishop, Acrocca, and Pietro Maranesi. They both wrote a lot about St. Francis, and they delved into St. Francis' life. So I really feel humble. My reflection about the question that you put forward, I think that there is a discovery by St. Francis of being a son, of being a creature, the son of God, sharing this being a creature with the creation as a whole, what we would call nature or environment. He calls it nature or creatures. It is a language of a religious kind that certainly touches his chords and our chords as friars and as believers. We are all creatures, so we share this reality. That is one reality, and this reality allows us to address or to turn to another creature, whether a stone or an animal, a plant, a mineral. It allows us to call it brother or sister. And we can call brother or sister also a creature that you might sense as a negative presence or a problematic presence for your life. Creatures and brothers and sisters are also thieves or wolves. But why is it so? Because there is this recognition of not being self-sufficient. The fact that he was not made by himself. So this creates a deep relation to all the others, to the environment as a whole, with the other creatures. So this is the element, in my opinion, which is absolutely key. And Francis feels that he has a task to fulfill, given to him by God in the book of Genesis. He must be able to cultivate these creatures. So being nature, but with a special role given to humanity, the role of building in a good manner and to
di evitare stravolgimenti, è il custodire, e il coltivare.
Being a custodian and cultivating, that is, give more life, give more possibilities of existence. So in this sense, harmony fits perfectly here. This element of interrelation and brotherhood. We might also be connected, but in a negative manner. This is something that we are discovering and we experience every day, unfortunately. But there is rather here this positive reading of fraternity, and everything changes here because brothers and sisters cannot harm one another. We also have experiences with brothers and sisters who, relations with siblings since the origins. From the first book of the scriptures, we have Cain and Abel. But there is this ideal situation in being a brother and a sister that changes things. And Francis realizes this in a very deep way. He feels he feels he is a creature and a loved creature, forgiven and object of mercy. So the Almighty and good, and so this is the beginning of the Song of Songs, and with great humbleness, he thinks that he can turn to other people, being aware that he serves the others. So the circularity given by brotherhood and minority, which means service. Thank you so much, Fra Marco, for this very good reflection. I have a difficult task. We try to deal with the spirituality here, but also the economic perspective, the business perspective. But we try to do this because Francis, from this standpoint, exactly like the harmony principles that can be universal, and they can help us interpret the world around us. So this allows me to broaden our discussion, and I can address Mark Palahi now. We heard this before in the discussion about the book. The systemic vision of nature, how can it interact with the economy and the production systems. First of all, can you tell us what we mean by circular bioeconomy? What do we mean by this word? And then would you tell us what can be the concrete tools to try and turn production systems into a harmonic
to the Circular
thing?
Bioeconomy Alliance, which, by the way, is an action-oriented charity established by King Charles III to translate the vision of harmony to action on the ground across different sectors and landscapes. So to the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, the Circular Bioeconomy is a new way of looking at our economy. It's in a way a new economic paradigm. Bio means life. It's an economic paradigm that is powered by life, rooted in nature, and that prospers in harmony with nature. So basically, it's an economy that operates within the ecological boundaries of our planet, that operates within the regenerative capacity of our biosphere. This is basically how our economic system nowadays does not work. If you look at our extractive economy relying on fossil resources, by the way, fossil means death, bio means life, so our economy, which is powered by fossil resources, have crossed the so-called planetary boundaries due to climate change, massive biodiversity loss, the degradation of our natural and managed ecosystems. So basically our economy develops at the expense of nature, climate, and our own health. And it happens because our economy, which by the way is addicted to fossil resources and to consumption at all costs, and consumption is not equivalent to progress. Sometimes we are confused about the two terms because GDP is about the overall consumption, has failed to value our most important capital and the basis for life and any economic activity, which is nature. So, as a starting point, a circular bioeconomy understands nature not as a resource to extract, which is how our current economic system sees nature, but as the keystone infrastructure regulating our planetary system, including our climate, the food we eat, the water we drink, the air that we breathe. So basically, nature is the basic fabric of life, supporting all living processes and therefore all our economic activities. The problem is that our economic system doesn't see that because birds, bees, and trees, they do not send bills to us. Also because our economic system derives value from price rather than price from value. So in a circular bioeconomy, economy and ecology become the two sides of the same coin. By the way, talking about Greek words, both economy and ecology come from the same Greek word oikos, which means our home, our environment. Economy, the nomos, is about managing the environment. Ecology, the logos, is about understanding our environment. You cannot manage what you don't understand. So in a circular bioeconomy, ecology guides the economy. So basically, our economy needs to be adjusted to the ecology of the planet. The good news is that we have the knowledge, and it's not rocket science. Basically, we have the old wisdom how we could build an entire economy anchored in nature-based solutions and circular bioeconomy production and consumption systems. As Tony mentioned, nature is circular and renewable by nature. So we need to adjust our business models, production and consumption systems, so that they become circular, and basically they are anchored in nature-based solutions. So a circular bioeconomy, and I will come back to some examples, a circular bioeconomy is about understanding, valuing, and relating to nature as what it is, the true engine of our economy. It's about recognizing biodiversity as the basis of our economic activities, because biodiversity is a prerequisite for life to adapt and evolve in a changing environment. Now, a concrete example, our food systems, which have been mentioned also before. Our food systems are a main cause and a main victim of the nature and climate crisis. They are responsible for 1/3 of the greenhouse emissions and 80–90% of the biodiversity loss, and a lot of the pollution due to pesticides, etc. Why this is happening? Because for the last 50 years, we have been producing food by using extractive approaches. We are translating this mining extractive mindset, fossil resources, to all other industries. So we are producing food by creating large monocultures and using synthetic inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, for gaining short-term production. Now, in addition to climate change, has resulted in highly degraded landscapes which are not any longer resilient to climate change in a moment where extreme events are becoming more frequent and intense than ever. droughts, and floods. There was a report published last summer by the European Investment Bank, which estimated that in Europe alone, the agricultural sector is losing 28 billion euros every year due to the impacts of floods and droughts in highly degraded and increasingly degraded land systems. And this will double in the next 10 years. So basically, our environmental problem has been translated now into an economic problem. Global insured losses due to climate change and nature degradation have doubled in the last 10 years. So all these so-called environmental externalities, so-called because they have never been externalities, they are very internal to our planetary system, are being translated into economic risk. In the terms of the food systems, we have a solution. It's about moving to regenerative food practices, regenerative agriculture, which is all wisdom. It's basically about replacing synthetic inputs by biological inputs. It's about maximizing diversity and biodiversity at the landscape level, rotation, bringing trees and livestock integrated into the way we are farming, and it's also minimizing physical disturbances. The nice thing is that now scientifically through our projects, we have seen that moving to a regenerative agriculture approach from one side reduces cost because you utilize less inputs, and now with the current wars, we see the increasing prices of fertilizers. So you see not only the impacts of using a fossil economy in climate change, but also our dependency on fossil resources creates instability and uncertainty. So moving to a regenerative approach, you reduce cost, you increase profitability, you reduce emissions, less inputs, less machines, you increase carbon sinks, because carbon follows biodiversity. Once you invest in biodiversity, carbon sequestration follows. And what is more important for food security, you reduce risks related to floods and droughts, because when you improve the health of the soils and the biodiversity, you create an sponge effect in the soils, which means that when there is a drought, the soils can release water. When there is a flood, the soils absorb better water. And this is proven scientifically. Moving to a regenerative farming approach builds resilience in terms of food security, and we have been working in real projects. But there will be many other examples. Aboca, for me, is a great example of how a regenerative circular business can deliver profits by and while restoring biodiversity in the land that it operates. So there are several examples, and with Aboca, in fact, we have established a living laboratory to document scientifically the benefits of transition to regenerative farming as basis for producing these medical devices.
Molto interessante, grazie Mark. Infatti, diciamo, questa idea della...
Thank you very much. This idea of the regenerative key for productive systems is a solution, but I continue with you because I'd like to ask you to give us some details about the durabilities, this element of sustainability, durable sustainability. Can you tell us something about it? Because we have seen that changing approach and looking at the regenerative context is a concrete tool in order to put together economy and ecology. But why should we speak about durable sustainability from your point of view? It's for you again.
I think here the key aspect is, look, if we don't build an economy that is in harmony with nature, it's impossible to be durable, because nature is the underpinning, the keystone infrastructure supporting all economic activities. So basically, it's about translating nature-based solutions in real business opportunities. And the beautiful thing now is that basically you have the science and the technology, and basically remember one thing, nature is the most sophisticated technology that we have. Technology is the skill of understanding. We forget that the billions of years of evolution offer us with amazing technologies that we can translate now, not only in the way we produce food, but also in innovating in terms of materials. We have the technology to transform, for example, wood into revolutionary materials that are more durable, stronger than steel, a material called nanocellulose, which also becomes biodegradable. So you see, at the end of the day, we need to be able to understand the dynamics of nature, to adjust what I mentioned before, the economy to the ecology of the planet. Nature is circular and renewable by nature. So if we build an economy that is circular by nature, we can really live and operate within the planetary boundaries.
Chiaro, quindi è chiarissimo questo aspetto. Quindi diciamo,
This is very clear. So it's already in nature that we find all these answers. We were saying that before. Sustainability itself, by its own nature, should be durable. I wanted to mention this concept because it is important to understand how this model can really represent also an economic tool to rethink our way of producing and also how we react when it comes to production. Now let's broaden our horizon. Antonio Caschetto, as I said before, Antonio is the director of the Laudato Si, an international movement that deals with communicating and speaking about these concepts to the Catholic community. Now, do you see a continuity with the approach of Circular Bioeconomy Alliance in what they are doing? And how can your center promote the concept of ecology, considering the Catholic community? And also, can you share with us, the idea of this roundtable is to go back home with some concrete solutions. So can you please tell us something about some concrete projects? What are the actions, the projects that your center is promoting in the framework of this mission to disseminate concepts about a more ecologically based vision? Thank you. I'd like to start mentioning Pope Francis. Yesterday it was the first anniversary of his death, from the Laudato Si encyclical, which leads us to better understand what is the integral ecology through the image of Saint Francis. I think that Francis is the best example of taking care of what is weak, of an integral ecology lived with joy and authenticity. He was a pilgrim who lived with simplicity, in a wonderful harmony with God, with the others, with nature, and with himself. So you see, in the Laudato Si encyclical, we already have the concept of harmony, which is the concept that is at the basis of what we have been saying so far, and also the topic of the book, harmony. When I tried to get prepared to this meeting, I tried to go back to the origin of the word harmony, as Ian said before, from Greek, union, proportion, agreement, the words that speak about connection, connecting, linking. The European root of the word, which connects everything with the art, arithmetic, basically order, which is a part of mythology. The idea of harmony comes from Ares, the king of war, and Aphrodite, the queen of beauty. Here, the most important square we have here is the temple of Minerva, which was also the king of the strategy of war, while Ares was was focused on the concept of the hardship of war. So basically, I think it is good to try and find harmony in contradictions, in suffering as well. Harmony is not necessarily everything nice. The lawns, St. Francis, with the wolf, with the bird. This is a stereotype. Here in Assisi, in our walks, we always try to put aside this image that many people recognize from the movies, from the literature, and speaking about the Canticle of Creatures, which is based on the suffering of St. Francis. It comes from the night, a moment in which he could not even see. So from this contrast, from this suffering, solitude, he also had the stigmatas and also the plagues coming from the stigmata. So the sanctity of St. Francis comes from going out and speak, blessed be our Lord. and also praise be to you. And this comes from the first pages of the Genesis. The first page of the Genesis is about the creation, with God that at the end of each day he could see that what he had created was good. But these are all things that come from an act of separation, from the chaos to order, to cosmos. Assisi, in our imagination, is in a way the capital of this integrated ecology, also because it is a privileged place. It's a place of beauty. The Basilica of St. Francis. Father Marco says, I live in the most wonderful place in the world. Well, I like it. I like this sentence, and I agree with him, because here we see architecture, art, light from the windows, the town planning approach, a part of the landscape, but it also has a meaning. It's not just beautiful. All the people whom we meet, they're not just simply tourists. Of course, beauty is helpful, because living in a wonderful place is much better than living in a negative situation, but in a negative context. But what is important is a meaning, trying to look for answers. People come here with questions. I love Assisi because people do not come here asking for any special miracles. There are other places which have a different vocation, where people in wheelchair go there looking for physical miracles. No, Assisi is different. The miracles here are about conversion, looking for a meaning, vocation. People want to get married. People have to understand whether they want to become nuns or friars. People come here to pray for that. So basically, we are in line with this world thanks to the project that we promote. We have Assisi, the land of the praise be to you, a project that was launched a few years ago. We have the Father Marco Moroni, we have Bishop Sorrentino, the previous mayor of the city of Assisi. So we already had people participating in this project, but there is also continuity in promoting these values. And we do this at the global level through training courses, educational courses. We train many animators of the Laudato Si, Praise Be to You, who share these values. For many years, I've trained many people throughout the country, and many of these people come back to Assisi very frequently because they still feel the connection. Then we have what we call this Laudato Si circles, local communities, local parishes, and then we have the advocacy activity that is connected to the public work that we do, the political work that we do, reducing fossil fuel uses with the Catholic communities, trying to cut the investments in fossil fuels, and the Sacred Convent has disinvested from fossil sources. And here in Assisi, with the partners, the municipality of Assisi, the diocese of Assisi, we have pilgrims, Laudato Si pilgrimage, meetings, long meetings which last 2-3 days, in order to better know Saint Francis and better understand his commitment as an icon, as Pope Francis wrote in the encyclical Laudato Si. And then we have volunteers. We have plenty of volunteers coming from the four corners of the world who come here in an immersive experience for many weeks. They live in San Damiano and in other places. And there are people who have come to Assisi many times, but every time they come here, they live and experience Assisi in many different ways. In a way, Assisi creates addiction, but there is no vaccine against this addiction. People continue to come back to Assisi. So the Canticle of the Creatures is a source of inspiration every day. It ends with the great humility, the Canticle. From Your Highness to humility. So from top to bottom. And this look from the bottom and from the top can allow us to change the world. But we should never do that alone. Sometimes we have the temptation to be self-sufficient. Well, with our small project, we try to promote cooperation with one another. We might be a little bit slower, but it is nicer working together, being together. So everybody is the recipient of this message. Everybody has the right to harmony and to beauty. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio.
Grazie Antonio perché
Thank you, Antonio, because you really highlighted this activity and the need to promote awareness. I'll try to conclude this roundtable looking at Massimo Mercati. We have already shared many reflections. We have already spoken also, thanks to Mark, we have spoken of Aboca. But I look at you thinking at the interconnection between human beings and nature. Your search for the solution, also the organization of your enterprises, of your enterprise, of your company, looks at nature. So from your point of view, what are the challenges, operational challenges, productive challenges that come from considering this system and creating a company based on this system? And do you think that this could lead to resilience and durable sustainability? Thank you, Marta. Good afternoon, everybody. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for your presence here today, Brother Marco, and also for having us feel like we are at home here in Assisi. It fills our heart. Let's hear a round of applause to Marco and Giulio, their availability, and also because this project starts together. We met Brother Giulio in St. James, thanks to Mark, who really wanted this to happen. And then with Brother Mark, whom we met in Rome, and we talked to him about this idea, about this publication, this translation into Italian. And I'd like to thank the ambassador as well for the beautiful message that he shared with us. And later on, Marco might say something about the project, and we would like to give our own contribution to this project, also with the revenue from the sales of the book. We are here to think, to reflect, but also to act. And so we come here to the point, to the role that a company can play. Why Aboca? What's the point of having a company playing a role in a context like the one that we have built here all together? Well, for almost 50 years, we have tried to find solution for the health of human beings through nature. All of this, and here we go back to the words mentioned by Mark, but by studying nature, we have finally come to understand that the concept expressed by King Charles in this book, also mentioned in the words by each and every one of us, this interconnection concept, is something that goes well beyond what we normally understand, or the concept that we try to pass on when we use the word sustainability or attention to nature. So when we try to understand the trees, the plants, we understand how nature is a complex system, and the interconnection of nature is not by chance, but it is a structural element. Ian and Tony mentioned the fundamental concept of human beings. We, human beings, biologically speaking, are an aggregation of different energies. If you think about the microbiota in our intestine, in our guts, in our organs, well, we live thanks to billions of bacteria with a DNA that is different from our own. So you understand that interconnection goes well beyond this idea of paying respect to nature. We are nature, and this concept can be expressed through symbiosis, this word. We live thanks to the others. We are the result of the relationship with the others. And this message is at the heart of a different vision, not just of the economy, not just of ecology, but a paradigmatic change in the way in which we place ourselves in front of the world and in front of our neighbors. And how could I put it? This is the concept of integrated ecology that meets the message of St. Francis. And I can say this by trying to apply these concepts. I've been trying to do that for many years within the framework of a company like Aboca. And this is not a small, tiny change. And in fact, Harmony, the book we are so pleased to celebrate today, and finally it is made available to the Italian public, it starts with 4 words. The first time I was with Mark, when we invited me, he showed me the book by King Charles, and this is a call to revolution. The first words are these: this is a call to revolution. So we're not speaking of tiny changes, we are speaking of a deep change of mentality, a change of mindset. As an entrepreneur, this is not meant to be a paternalistic vision, a concept of redistribution, brotherhood to be bought. No, it is rather about taking stock of the fact that what we are saying is real. All the living systems are interconnected with one another, and being interconnected means a revolution that is a scientific revolution, an evolution from a reductionist scientific approach to a new vision, thanks to technology, not opposing technology, but thanks to technology, we can change. We can better understand the complexity of nature, also thanks to artificial intelligence. But the approach must be that of understanding the logic of complex systems which have their own rules, and this changes the scientific approach. Again, going back to Pope Francis, the One Health concept. We cannot be healthy in a sick planet. Understanding all this is finally possible. Interconnection amongst all the living system highlights another fundamental principle, which brings us closer to the message by St. Francis. The concept according to which individual good and common good are interconnected. We cannot have an individual good without common good, and we cannot have common good if we disregard individual good. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this message was very clear. If we had the virus, all the others, of course, could not feel good. So this simple rule has been forgotten again. And we are speaking about individual good and common good as if they could be distinct elements, while, on the contrary, they are an integral part of the same vision. So when Mark told us ecology is also economy, we cannot have an economy that guides the ecology. It's the logos that should guide us towards the creation of value. Value creation that should be either for everybody or for nobody. Tony, last year, published a book about inequality. We work with Stefano Zamagni, the topic of striking an economic balance that leads us to and brings us back to that vision that St. Francis expressed through the sine proprio. We do not own anything. We have Pietro Maranesi in the audience. This is another book published by Aboca, without sine proprio, without owning anything, which is about the vision of St. Francis when it comes to ownership. Ownership as custody, but not in a generic sense. but rather taking stock of the fact that nothing belongs to us, not even ourselves. We do not belong to ourselves. And this is what St. Francis said in the parable of the perfect happiness. So, all the various elements, scientific revolution, social revolution, a vision of freedom, according to St. Francis, based on humbleness, equality, and the concept expressed before by Brother Marco. When you mentioned can enable brothers and sisters who are born in the same family, so that is not the brother we are talking about, the brotherhood we are talking about. We are speaking about a brotherhood that is chosen and not due. It is a way to interpret interconnection, taking stock of that, and from there and creating a social network that is the community, then the vision of a global world, as mentioned in the book by King Charles, that has just one vision. We are all together, but we are all on the same side. This is the message, and I'm really proud of sharing this message and bringing it to the attention of the Italian audience so that we can build the next steps in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Massimo. In this regard, interconnection, as we said before, is key. And we have seen that it allows us to look at economy and ecology together, interconnection and brotherhood from Francis with this humbleness. Let us understand that we are nature, we are the system. At the end of this day, we have already addressed the principles of harmony, and we fully understand the important connection of this book to this festival. This book dealing with the principles of harmony and deals with finding in interconnection and the revolution, I mean the need to shift perspective. So this is why it is so close to St. Francis, and this is why we are here discussing these topics. So at the end of the day, we put all the pieces together. So the audience, with the public now can see how the different pieces get together, and the puzzle can be seen as an overall view. So at the end of this festival, we can certainly discuss these topics with companies, but also with people dealing with education and awareness raising. Before closing this session, I'd like to go back to our host, Fra Marco, so that he can share with us the goals of this book here in Assisi. Why? First of all, I need to thank Massimo Mercati and Aboca because the presentation of the book is also connected to a gift that we heard in what the ambassador read in the letter from King Charles. There we heard about giving the possibility through the proceeds from the book sales to support, to help landscapes in the Umbria region. So a very concrete example is here, close to the forest of San Francis. Before entering the forest from the Piazza Superiore, there is a gate giving access to the forest, a big forest, and most of it is given to FAI, which is an environmental association, making it a natural reserve, so a very natural sanctuary where it is possible to spend time in contact with nature. At the entrance of the forest, before the entrance, actually, there is a small part that is that friars take care of. It is owned by Sacro Convento and by the Holy See. But this area needs some adjustments to meet some specific needs. For instance, the needs of people with disabilities. So in order to get to the entrance, and another place which is quite meaningful, the upper level of the Cloister of the Dead, it is necessary to climb up some stairs. So people with disabilities cannot get there. So the proceeds from the book will be given. A first installment of 20,000 euros has already been promised, and we hope the proceeds will be high in order to help with this project. That we also include reforestation, because we're going to remove some trees, but we will rewild in a way. So in order to have access to the upper level of the Cloister of the Dead, which was the old graveyard, the old cemetery of the friars, which is an amazing place, a beautiful place, but it is not possible to visit it now. But we would like to make it a place of peace and silence. Sometimes in Assisi, which is the city of peace, I mean, it is not so silent because it is very crowded. So we are trying to recreate a place where, following the life and spirituality of St. Francis, people can also have this experience of silence and spirituality. And I wish to say that this is just a small signal of being close. But we also wanted to make a tangible contribution. And I will take this opportunity to thank Mark and Antonio on my part, and also the willingness of King Charles of promoting, the drawing closer BBC and Laudato Si. So certainly we can keep on working together. This meeting can just be seen as a beginning rather than the end of a journey. And we will resume at 9 p.m. So I'd like to close in the capacity as director of a foundation. I'd like to link back to the last words. We would like to rethink the development of the local areas of the so-called territories. So we are doing this gathering the public sector, the private sector, the third sector, from the perspective of the circular approach. This reflects our vision of territorial development. This is what we would like to do in terms of change. This revolution, it's a call we are ready to respond to. And I encourage you all to follow us in this festival, which is a festival on the move. It will continue this evening with the screening of the film based on the book. We have Nicholas Brown, the director here. He will be with us and is going to spend a few words about his contribution to the book. And I encourage you all to follow our festival, and I wish to thank also the sponsors and those who made this event possible over time. So thank you so much to you all.